The BBC report into the two documentaries, The Doctors Under Attack, which wasn't screened, which was screened on Channel 4, harrowing viewing, and the living in Gaza, which was narrated by the son of the Hamas operative. The report into these documentaries has been published, and it comes across as an attempt to whitewash the BBC. It's the scandal surrounding how to survive a war zone. That's the name of the program, and this damning internal report betrays failings, no matter how careful the language. As I say, the language is very carefully calculated. It's very precise. It's very cold, and it tries very hard to whitewash the BBC. The documentary was broadcast in February, narrated by the 13-year-old Palestinian boy named Abdullah al-Yazuri, and viewers were told that he was the son of Ayman al-Yazuri, a deputy minister. They were not told that he was the son of Ayman al-Yazuri, a deputy minister of the Hamas-run government in Gaza. A detail later exposed triggering widespread outrage and calls for accountability. Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation under UK law. Any link, especially that of the narrator's immediate family member, holding ministerial rank in the Hamas government constitutes critical contextual information, and I think possibly a criminal act, doesn't it? If you're promoting a terrorist organisation, why are the police not arresting the people at the BBC for promoting a terrorist organisation? It seems to me to be much the same as arresting vicars in the street for holding banners saying the PA. The BBC's own guidelines stress that audiences must not be misled by omission, yet that's precisely what happened. And I don't see that any amount of report can exonerate them. The internal review by Peter Johnston, the BBC's Director of Editorial Complaints, confirmed the breach of guidelines on accuracy, acknowledged the BBC failed to disclose critical information, but the review stopped short of finding a breach of impartiality rules, insisting the content itself was not influenced by Hamas. Well, it becomes very difficult to see how that is how that can possibly be upheld. It's cold comfort. The central fact remains: the BBC didn't tell its audience that the child narrator was the son of a Hamas official, thereby failing to equip viewers to judge potential bias or manipulation. And indeed, it was promoting the Hamas organisation, promoting a terrorist organisation. The BBC categorised the documentary as high risk from the start. Emails reveal repeated questions about the need for due diligence. Staff asked, have we checked contributors for Hamas links? Has Abdullah's background been examined? And these questions were not answered. Hoya Films, the independent production company hired by the BBC, admitted it knew by July 2024 that Abdullah's father was a Hamas minister. They met him in person in August to secure filming permission, yet they didn't disclose this to the BBC. Their explanation: they viewed him as a civilian or technocratic official, not a political or military actor. That's a risible claim. Anyone familiar with Gaza's political structure knows that the Hamas government doesn't distinguish between civilian ministries and political military leadership, and the BBC itself bears responsibility for failing to demand complete answers to these questions. Their own emails show staff pressed for clarity, but when they received vague assurances like all clean of Hamas, they didn't follow up with the necessary rigour. This wasn't merely an oversight, it's institutional negligence. And as I say, if the PA, if carrying a cardboard banner saying you decry genocide and you support the PA, then presumably the BBC is also in breach of some sort of criminal issues, according to the Terrorism Act 2000. I don't see how that can possibly be. How this is not a criminal issue. I find it extraordinary how the one thing is a criminal issue and the other is not. It attributes most responsibility to the production company while acknowledging the BBC's failures and oversight. It insists there's no intentional deceit. Well, they're not asking these people with the PA banners, are you intentionally supporting a terrorist organisation? The people are saying we are intentionally decrying genocide. No intentional deceit here in the BBC, despite evidence that Hoyo Films had detailed knowledge of the father's position and chose not to share it. Consider this. The internal notes reveal that Hoyo Films told the BBC they had done social media checks and that everything was all clean. Yet within 24 hours of broadcast, independent journalists uncovered Abdullah's family connections with ease. Equally troubling is the matter of payment. Abdullah's family received £795 in cash and further goods to a total of £1,817, and the BBC claimed this was a reasonable disturbance fee. But it emerged that they only learned of this payment arrangement after the broadcast. The documentary contains sequences meant to depict a single mass casualty event. It used timestamps, maps, and narration to reinforce this impression, while in reality it spliced footage shot on different days. That's like reality TV. The child volunteer and paramedic wore different shoes and had different haircuts in different shots. The BBC's report dismisses this as a minor error, claiming audiences were not misled about the broader context. This is insulting. The entire sequence was designed to create the illusion of real-time documentation of a specific attack. It's a textbook narrative manipulation, and it's the same thing as the Queengate scandal, with with reality TV and the photo shoot that the Queen was either walking to or walking from. The Stephen Lambert scandal. Another controversial aspect is the mistranslation of the Arabic word Yahud, which is Jew, which is translated as Israelis. This is not a neutral error. It sanitizes the ideological nature of Hamas's rhetoric and it distorts the reality of anti-Jewish animus by framing it as purely anti-Israel. The report astonishingly defends the choice as not misleading. Deborah Turnes, head of BBC News, admitted the BBC failed to run these questions to ground. She apologised but refused to say whether anybody would be dismissed, deferring to process. And the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, condemned the BBC's reported failures and demanded accountability, calling it a series of catastrophic failures, and she is right. Ofcom has now opened its own investigation into whether audiences were materially misled. They were. Meanwhile, the BBC removed the documentary from iPlayer with vague talk of re-editing it into shorter films. Well, why remove the evidence? Why? What does this affair tell us? It exposes a culture of bureaucratic evasion. Removing a documentary which is under suspicion is about deceit in itself, isn't it? A high-risk film about one of the world's most contested conflicts was greenlit despite gaping holes in the BBC's own vetting. And when internal staff raised concerns, they were brushed aside. The BBC's response has been to deflect, to share blame with the independent production company, to promise new processes. It even announced it would create a new senior leadership role for news documentaries, a classic institutional reflex to create another layer of management instead of confronting the root problem. Fundamentally, this scandal is not just about one programme, it's about the BBC's capacity to report fairly and transparently on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And when viewers cannot trust the BBC to disclose something as basic as the political affiliation of a key contributor's family, then trust collapses, and collapses with good reason. If the BBC wants to repair that trust, it must do more than apologise and reshuffle titles. It must embrace genuine accountability, demand unflinching transparency, and reassert a commitment to truth that's not politically expedient but principled and consistent. Otherwise, it's behaving very much like like a Russian TV channel, NTV, when it gets caught out and found that it's done something wrong, it just removes the offending episode. Shame on the BBC.